Hello. We're so glad that you're joining us for today's first episode of Lee Live. Today we have a remarkable panel of some remarkable people, and we're excited to dive in. But before we jump in, we know that the past week or so has been quite the whirlwind. These are challenging times, full of uncertainty, questions, worries, and doubts. And we in the Lee community don't want to shy away from the hardships that many of us are currently enduring. Many of us are dealing with an overwhelming fear, sometimes to a point where it's paralyzing, and we just feel we need to stay indoors and stay on our couches. A lot of us are genuinely worried for our loved ones and wanting to care for them and take responsibility for them. There's this deeply disquieting isolation and disconnection that each of us is experiencing. Some of us, while we're at home, wherever that is, are experiencing deeply difficult family situations. Others of us have had heartbreaking disappointments. Seniors missing many of the lasts. Athletes missing out on the opportunities of a lifetime. And then there's this general dread of an anxiousness in the midst of this unknown. Today, we want to bring some practical tips and ideas to help us find and create meaningful ways to connect deeply. These days are difficult, but it doesn't mean we have to encounter the difficulties alone. It doesn't mean we don't hold tight to each other, and it doesn't mean we can't create hope together. After all, we are in this together. We're committed to each other, and we're committed to our community. We take the concerns that we have with a weightiness and understanding that our decisions not only affect us, but they also affect those around us. One of our goals with these virtual interactions is persisting in our commitment to each other in the midst of our community. These are times that we can come together. We can embrace the hardships, but we can embrace each other even more tightly, whether it be through our homes, in person-to-person contact, or through our screens. We can still embrace each other. Today we have three remarkable individuals who have been working like crazy to find ways to better support you, our students, and our families. First off, we have Brittany Gates, our Director of Student Care.
Hi.
We also have Kevin Hudson, our Director of Campus Recreation. And lastly, we have Rachel Coffey, our Director of Health Services. Hi. Thanks so much for being here today, friends. We're excited to dive into this conversation about wellness and what that means during this time of uncertainty for us. All three of these folks are experts in their fields, and they're just all around great people. They're going to help lead us in this conversation about wellness, holistically, in all areas of life. And what a timely topic for us. As I said, these are difficult times for many of us in our lives. Nearly all of us are at high risk of negative isolation if we're not able to find meaningful ways to engage with others. Today's buzzword is social distancing, as you may have heard if you're scrolling through Facebook or watching a minute of the news. And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But I can't help but wonder if it's still possible to experience some semblance of closeness, although we're in this place of social distancing. A closeness in our communities, a closeness that goes beyond the barriers that we're experiencing today. And so with that said, panel, I'll go ahead and introduce our first question, but we want to talk about some of the risks that come with the isolation and social distancing that come in. So what would you say are some of those wellness risks that come with those things?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind when I think about risk during this time, and we all commit to being honest and having honest conversations. And so part of the reason why we want to address this question and acknowledge risks is it helps us understand why we want to encourage you to take other actions so that you're not living in the space of those risks all the time. Because I think one of the things that at least we've noticed as we've been talking is there's this inundation with news media right now, right? There's this over inundation with news media. And when I look at it, particularly from an emotional health or mental health perspective, there's some risk that comes with persistent and consistent overexposure to media. And so I'm not discouraging you from being educated. In fact, education on this topic has been known to reduce stress and make people feel equipped and prepared. But I think there is risk in a persistent over inundation. I think we've talked, there's all sorts of sites coming at you with information. And so in doing that, just be mindful, and that's part of what we're trying to encourage here is how do you be mindful of, how much exposure you have to news media at this time and what sources. And I think we mentioned CDC is a good source for...
CDC and the World Health Organizations are probably the most reputable and the sites that really need to be followed. They have the most recent statistics and information available to them, along with a lot of research that can back them up.
And so I think there is risk in living in a persistent state of distress by continual and constant exposure to news media, which is different than this idea of just being educated and informed. So.
And right now with the social distancing, that can be very difficult for many people. It also can have some health risk all on its own. So I think it's important for us to understand the importance of, in this time period, of trying to regulate our own stress and our own worry and increase our good health in whatever way that we can.
Yeah, in terms of recreation and activity, a lot of the media has been focused, and rightfully so, on the idea of stay home, stay isolated. I even heard one stay on the couch, and that's really not what we want to do. We want to be striving toward optimal health. And physical activity and social interaction, those are all pieces that are really key to that and really key components of recreation and wellness in general. It's a social thing, but it really is critical that we continue to engage in that, but still maintain those social distancing guidelines and adhere to it. One of the things that we've seen with some of the college demographic is there seems to be two extremes. They're either in denial or they're distressed. And so I think it's important for us to maintain a good balance with that.
Right. And I think specifically from the background, I come from a mental health background, and being mindful of the fact that this encouragement and recommendation toward social distancing and the isolation that might feel like it comes with that can pose risk to mental health. And we want to be honest about that risk and the potential for increased things like depression, anxiety, stress, as a result of loneliness and feelings of boredom. And so this isn't saying that you're definitely going to experience those things. I think part of what we're trying to do is help you find alternatives so that you don't live in those persistent states. But I think we have to be very, very self-aware and paying attention to how we are doing, right? And, how are we eating? How are we sleeping? How is our energy? How is our mood? And how do we begin to self-check those things so that we pay attention to how this is affecting us personally?
Self-awareness is very important right now during this time because, as we all know, self-awareness, we can keep track of how we're feeling, the actions that we take, and we can make deliberate choices. And I think that's going to be really important as we face the next few days, weeks, possibly months.
Absolutely, and this is a time that it's not just about seeking to survive during this time, but how do we actually get to optimal health during this time? I don't know, Kevin, if you have thoughts in that regard as far as recreation goes, what does that look like?
Well, that's a really key piece of optimal health. I mean, activity, physical activity, it boosts brain function, it improves quality of life, it relieves stress and anxiety, it improves your sleep patterns. There's so many benefits that come from that it's really important that we do maintain those things.
Absolutely. And
having a strong, robust immune system is key to being able to fight off the disease.
Absolutely.
So.
Great. Well, thank you guys. And in an effort to respect these patterns of social distancing and taking responsibility for our communities, we're of course utilizing more and more technology than ever before. I mean, look at us right now coming across your screen. And so there's no doubt that technology had a foothold and a necessary place in our lives before. But now that many of us are quarantined or put inside of our homes for the safety of others, it's even more prevalent than before. And so there's tons of research that points to the negative impact of screen time and screen use as it pertains to these aspects of healthiness and what that means for our mental health, our physical health obviously, and even our emotional and other types of health. And so now there are new ways of interacting through technology, and that's bringing a whole new fold of how we're teaching classes, of how we're engaging in the life of campus as we are. So how do we balance the increased need for the screen time in order to connect, especially with these new online and Zoom class models? How do we do that in healthy ways?
Well, this is something Brittany and I talked a lot about, and one of the important things I think about bringing classes online to Zoom is it's going to establish a routine and get us back to that a little bit. Having those routines is really important, and having some structure to your day. So getting up at a decent hour, going and doing some physical activity, going and doing some class or academic work, learning a new skill. Those are all things that you can plan and build yourself these structured elements to help you navigate your day rather than sitting on the couch and just consuming media or negative news. But having structure to that is a really important thing. And from the physical activity side of things, I think a lot of people who are active will probably remain active. They've got the resources, they've got the knowledge. One of the concerns for me is people who may not have a very active lifestyle. They don't realize that even a 15-hour class load, walking to and from class from their dorms, generates anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes of exercise a day. That is critical. It's critical. They're outside, they're moving, and those are really important components of health that if they're sitting in a Zoom classroom and they've got 10 minutes to their next Zoom classroom, what do they do in that 10 minutes? So that activity and that exposure to being outside and moving around could go away for some of those people who don't have the motivation to continue engaging in physical activity.
And so as we were talking about this idea of routine and schedule, and we know in the mental health world that structure, routine, schedule, it's very, very helpful in helping manage mental health in general. So we know that's a critical component, but one of the things we talked about, adding exercise into your schedule, I would encourage people to add components of emotional wellness into your schedule and to plan time to become self-aware and self-check like Rachel talked about.
Be very deliberate in your actions.
Yes.
I think that's really important, that we really need to acknowledge and be aware that we have got to do this in order to maintain a healthy state of mind, body, and just emotional state of being.
Right. So as you're thinking of what a good schedule and routine is, obviously the fact that your classes are live at the same time, that's incredibly helpful. But as you're thinking of other things to add into your day, consider all these different areas of life, whether it's your health and your fitness, your emotional health, your spiritual life. How do you develop plans for those throughout the day? And I think the key here is not just developing the plan, but actually following through with the plan. And I think it's all well and good in theory if we take the time and maybe make a little schedule chart and have an idea. But the critical piece is not just the idea of it, but the follow through of it. And so I don't think any of us are too old to be celebrated, right?
I don't think so. And knowing that you can still connect with one another.
Yes.
There's a variety of ways that we will still be able to connect with each other via Facebook, text, FaceTime, a variety. And I was really struck this week as I looked at a story about the Italian people and how they were able to connect with each other from their balconies. They actually all came out on their balconies, played music, and participated together in the national anthem. And that just really humbled my spirit to know that their human spirit was so strong that they still stood together and they supported each other.
And so I think this idea of being deliberate and being intentional in crafting a plan that's going to be effective for you, and then following through and being creative with that plan, I think is a real key component to balance at this time.
Accountability is an important piece of that too.
Great.
It's okay to have a partner that you're checking in with from time to time and communicating with, even if it is through technology that is holding you to that plan or has a similar plan to you.
Right, that's great.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really beautiful way that we can still seek connection during this time. We can communicate through a phone call or through a screen or from our balconies, just like you talked about, Rachel. I love that idea, and there's also tons of research on the positive effects of technology and how that can continue helping us connect in really meaningful ways. A certain author kind of puts it this way. He calls them technology accelerators. How do we use technology to accelerate our mission, to communicate in meaningful ways, to still connect in the midst of our our personhood and who we are. And I think that's a wonderful way to think about this. And it's the age-old question of, are we allowing technology to use us, or are we using technology in wonderful ways to help push us forward and, again, to continue helping us connect in those ways. And so these events are absolutely affecting our overall wellness in countless ways, often ways that we might not even recognize, ways that we might not know. And I think there's a way to view this as maybe COVID-19, the coronavirus, whatever you want to call it, it's not necessarily impacting us in a way telling us to avoid certain things, but more so it's an opportunity to engage in certain things. And so I'm curious, as we consider effective ways to cope, how do we shift our understanding from seeing things to avoid to seeing things to engage with? What are some effective coping strategies that we can use?
Healthy eating habits are of utmost importance during this time. I think as we're all home and maybe in a self-isolation, it's very easy to sit on the couch, grab the easiest thing to eat, which is usually not the most healthy. And so taking the time to really plan and cook a meal and having some healthy food, rest, relaxation, make sure you are taking care of yourself. If that means reading a book, candlelit, hot bath, anything that helps you stay healthy is very important right now. And I think we need to be very self-aware and take the time to take care of ourselves.
And I think when it comes to kind of this idea of mental wellness during this time, or emotional wellness, there's a lot of suggestions that I have, and I'll go through my list with everybody. But one of the things that I want to immediately encourage people toward is this idea of gratitude and practicing moments of gratitude. There's actually tons of research on the topic. If you need something to do with your time, you could look into it. But there's tons. The National Institutes of Health posted some research about people who are actively practicing gratitude and the ways that impacted the hypothalamus in their brain and how that reduced stress. So we have evidence that just taking moments to be grateful, and you can do this in a lot of ways. Maybe it's sitting down for 5 minutes each day and writing out and reflecting on things that you're grateful for in the midst of where we are. And I think that's really critical, not just where we want to be, but where we are and what are we grateful for in this moment. So journaling in general and continuing to reflect on how I'm doing, how I'm feeling. So that self-awareness and those checkpoints. I think everybody's dealing with a lot of losses, and Alex talked about that a little bit in the introduction. And so I think it's absolutely okay to acknowledge that and to talk with people about that. I actually encourage it because it doesn't take away from the rest of the experience. I think we can be unsteady and uncertain and live in the unknown and process these losses and understand why we're in this position all at the same time. And I think it's critical for our mental health that we do that we find those outlets, those points of connection where, isolation doesn't mean we're not relationally connected. It means we have to be creative with how we connect. Right. And so I think it's really, really critical to talk about how we're doing to intentionally relax and meditate, engage prayer and other spiritual disciplines to kind of soothe ourselves at this time.
And just knowing that you can reach out to each other. Right. You can still give of yourself. That's produces a very healthy emotion. Absolutely. It helps us feel better, helps others feel better. And we can still do that even in this time. Even if it's a simple phone call to say, hey, I understand, I'm feeling the same way. Let's just lift each other up and be here for each other.
Absolutely.
And I think another thing, just from the recreation and activity side of things, I talked with one of our strategic partners, Hannah Davis, who runs a personal training studio yesterday, and she mentioned just go outside. Get outside in the sunshine, which they've showed has an impact on the virus's ability to function and stay. So go outside, and that may be more challenging for people that maybe live in apartment complexes or more crowded conditions, but get outside and be active. There's a lot of places that are offering fitness programs that are outside where there's small groups getting together in open spaces. And I got an email yesterday from the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, and the state parks are open, and they encourage people, hey, come out and get on a trail. Maintain your 6 feet, but get outside in the sunshine, and that's a little harder to do here in Cleveland right now, but we are going to have some sun today, I believe. Yeah. But that's another really important piece of this. And then there's all kinds of resources out there. And it's been interesting to see the fitness community. A lot of places are offering free programming that you can access online, daily workouts. As a matter of fact, Hannah's studio is starting a challenge Monday called the Immunity Booster. So it's going to focus on the things that Rachel talked about with nutrition, with self-care, daily workout routines, and things that are going to help you boost that immune system that we talk about with the whole idea of optimal health. So those are some really practical ones. There's some apps. She recommended an app called Downward Dog that has yoga for all different levels of experience, and those are things that you can do on your own. And I talked with one other partner yesterday, was Matrix, and they have an exercise library on their website that are things you can do on a set of stairs. So it really isn't hard to be active and to keep the juices flowing in terms of those things that are going to help you relieve the stress and burn off some of those stressors that are tied in with the news of today.
And I think one more piece to throw in from a mental health perspective, as you are being self-aware and paying attention to how this is affecting you, if you realize you do need additional support at this time, I know a lot of counseling agencies are working really hard to provide remote access, particularly our counseling center on campus. And so they are still up and running. If you, as a student here, need their resources, please give them a call and see how they can support you, or see if somebody here can help you locate a counseling provider in your area. I'm happy to do that if you reach out to my office. If you need to find remote access to therapy during this time, I think a lot of people are working really hard to make sure you can have that.
Stay engaged. Stay engaged with each other as much as we can, and however we can. I think that's real important.
And the rec center is still open, and that was one of the things that we wanted for the kids who are here. They have to be here. We're keeping it open. Now, we're cleaning like crazy to make sure that we're not facilitating spread, but we felt like it was important for kids who have to be in a dorm. They've obviously got to eat. They need a place to burn off stress. So we're open. And so if you're in town, come on down.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point, is students, families, parents out there know that we're here, and we're ready to help. So if you need access to any of these resources that Rachel, Kevin, or Brittany have mentioned, please reach out to us. Please log into the website, shoot us an email, and we're happy to hand out those resources and get them to you. To round out our conversation, I want to ask you guys, as more of a lighthearted point of encouragement, if you could share something with our students, our families out there right now, to encourage them, one final thought, what would that thought be?
We're praying for you. We are worried about you. We're praying that we will all make it through all this healthy. We want you to be healthy. We want you to return healthy. And honestly, we can't wait until you come back.
And I would just say stay active. Every little bit helps. 5 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time, whatever it is. There's benefits to it. So it doesn't take much. So stay active.
And I have a list of things I'd love to leave as a final thought. I think in a situation where everything feels out of our control, and we know that affects our stress levels, there's so much within your capacity to control your responses, your perspective, your ability to lean on hope in the midst of dire circumstances. And so my encouragement is you find outlets toward that hope, and do one thing a day. Maybe pick one suggestion a day. You're not going to be able to do all of it at once, and that's overwhelming. And so you have to adapt your expectations as you go. But do one thing a day, and if you need some celebration for doing it, call one of us, and we'll cheer you on, because we're cheering you on from here, and we wish you were here with us, but in the distance, we will be your biggest cheerleaders.
Absolutely, we will. And hopefully that's what you hear today, is that we're here, we're with you. And this idea of wellness isn't just about avoiding COVID-19, but this idea of wellness goes beyond. It goes well into our communities, and it allows us to live a fulfilled life, a life in which we can thrive together. Our hope is that this was helpful and beneficial to you guys. We'll be back with more content throughout the coming weeks, and we're thrilled to continue some of these conversations as we go on. Thanks for tuning in today to Lee Live. We'll catch you guys later.
And we're clear.
Woo-hoo!
Cool. We made it.
I think it's cigarette